as the title suggests, we're going to be asking ourselves, are the Raptors going to be trash this year? Now, of course, that's a little bit of hyperbole on my part because you got to get clicks. But the most interesting thing that I find about the Toronto Raptors every season is that they somehow always mix things up and run slightly unconventional lineups, and they manage to get the job done somehow, some way. We do know that they did end up losing Fred VanVleet, and he was really the most costly loss that they had this offseason. Obviously, he got pried away for the money that the Rockets had for him, and it was a bag that he just couldn't refuse because he really didn't think that he would get that in the market. I didn't think he was going to get that in the market, but case in point, he did. They did end up getting Dennis Schroeder though, and at first, in my head when I saw this signing, it made sense because Dennis Schroeder isn't that much of a fall off from Fred VanVleet, but at the same time, it's just one of those things where it's like a great value pickup. Like, it's going to get the job done enough, but at the same time, he's not pushing the needle. But then I watched him play in the World Cup, and obviously we know that Germany won. They beat the US, and he won the World Cup MVP. He was very solid across the entirety of the World Cup, and that's why Germany won, honestly. Of course, it wasn't just because of him, but it was largely in part to that. And I think the thing that really set him apart from me watching him was his control over the game when he had the ball in his hands, knowing how to play his role, knowing how to not make costly mistakes, and just being an overall solid team player. And we know he squandered opportunities in the past, and he lost out on big contract extensions, not just any contract extensions. And those things didn't really work out for him. But we saw him kind of come into his own in this World Cup. And after last season, this time of year, he was actually unemployed, if I remember correctly. I don't believe he was on an active roster. And now he's a World Cup champion, MVP, and now he's going in as a starting point guard as it stands for a new team. Now, to recap, obviously, the Toronto Raptors ended up firing their previous coach, Nick Nurse. Now they have Darko at the helm, which should be a little bit spicy, honestly, to see how he decides to switch things up, because obviously they're going to cater to what the players already know. But at the same time, it's going to be a little bit different just because it's a new coach. He's had much coaching success in the past, but most people don't know who he is. So this is going to be the time for him to truly make a name for himself. Obviously, like I said, Dennis Schroeder starting at the point guard spot. Then you have OG Anunoby at the shooting guard. Then you have Scotty Barnes at the small forward. The perennial all-star Pascal Siakam at the power forward. And Jakob Poeltl at the center spot, who they did actually end up re-signing. They then have Precious Achiuwa coming off the bench at center. Chris Boucher at the 4, Grady Dick at the 3. I'm interested to see how he plays because in the Summer League, he looks very, very good. You have Gary Trent Jr. at the shooting guard spot, and then you have Malachi Flynn at the point guard spot. Of course, there's a couple more pieces on the roster, but those are the main ones that we're going to see on the court on a night-to-night basis. You still obviously have Masai at the helm and Bobby Webster at the GM spot. Fun fact about Webster, he was the youngest GM when he was originally signed to them. The youngest GM in NBA history. But the thing is, with Masai at the helm, you can always trust that the Raptors are always going to be a solid team. They might not do anything that jumps off the page. They're obviously not guaranteed a championship. And personally, for me, this roster doesn't show contender status. But at the same time, there's still going to be a roster night in and night out that's going to compete. They're going to be defensively active. They're going to lock in. They're not going to have 120, 130 point games. It's going to be more so, you're maybe a couple 110s, but I'm expecting more around like the 105, 103, maybe even some 90-point games. As a little bit of a refresher, they did end up going 41-41 last season, and they ended up losing in the play-in tournament, obviously single loss elimination at the time, to the Chicago Bulls. Now, the Bulls didn't make much noise in the playoffs either anyways, but it was kind of a somber note for them to go out on, hence why Nick Nurse ended up getting the can. Obviously, before Nick Nurse, there was Dwayne Casey, who went out in similar fashion after winning the Coach of the Year award, which was questionable, but then you had Nick Nurse, and then you had him win the championship because Kawhi was there. And credit to them because they also had a great coaching scheme. They managed his minutes well. They didn't overstress him. It was a learning experience for them, and they got the job done. But this year is going to be a little bit different because Pascal Siakam has been in a lot of trade talks. And while he hasn't been dealt yet, I was on the fence at the beginning of the offseason that he was going to get traded away, but now it's looking like they're just going to go into the season and just roll with what they have, which credit to them, I do understand and I would respect them going through with that. But it just seemed to be a little bit interesting or a little bit ridiculous that they sat there and put him in all these rumors, and everybody was, the rumor mill was just going insane about this guy. The most interesting thing about them having this entire roster kind of centered around Pascal Siakam is obviously we know he's 6'8", 240. He did give them 24, 8, and 6 last season on 48% efficiency, so pretty solid in that department. A reliable player, a solid centerpiece, I would say. Not necessarily championship caliber. I don't think he's the one for them, or he's the one for really any team, but he's still a great piece to have on your roster. The thing to pay attention to is he's actually 29. I don't know why I thought he was like 24-ish, 25-ish. I thought he was a lot closer to the Scotty Barnes realm. Obviously, Scotty's just like fresh, but like maybe 3-4 years older than him. So to see that he's already about to be 30 is just caught me by surprise, I guess. It makes sense that they did decide to go and get Dennis Schroeder now. I think that he's going to be really the guy that determines whether they do make the playoffs or not. Like I said, they were 41-41 last season. So the expectation is that at the very least, if you fire Nick Nurse and hire a new coach, the new coach has to do better in his first season, because the only reason you step back really is because you lost Fred VanVleet, and Dennis Schroeder, coming off this FIBA World Championship, seems to be a reliable guy. Obviously, before, it didn't seem like an even trade. It was like you're trading a dime for a nickel. And of course, a nickel's still useful, but it's just not a dime. And that's not any knock on Dennis Schroeder. It's just his career thus far hasn't shown us that he's the Kyrie Irving to the LeBron back when they were in Cleveland. Like, he just doesn't seem to have that level of star power. Solid player, good role player, great player to have coming off your bench if you have that much depth and that much opportunity. But to see him in a starting role, I think we're going to see a little bit more of his game play out. Obviously, he started in the past with previous teams, but I think him being with the Canadian team is going to be more interesting, just because obviously the Raptors always find a way to win games and find their ways to stay in games. They might not always win them, but they're always in a game that you really wouldn't expect, and they're never a trash team no matter what you would expect them to be starting out the season. So I do have them still being a 40-win team, maybe around 45, 46. I don't think they're going to push 50. Obviously, the health of the team and the health of the other teams in the Eastern Conference, because it is a little bit loaded right now, is going to play into it. And if the Heat do end up getting Dame, which I believe that they will, it's just going to be a lot of things that come into play. But they're really a 44, 45, 7, 8-ish seed team going into the playoffs. I think that they will win a play-in game if they are forced to play one. I don't see them making it out of the first round, but I remain willing to be proven wrong. If we have any Raptors fans watching this video, by all means, go ahead and drop your thoughts. Let me know what you guys think about your team going into this next season. Or if you just happen to catch a few Raptors games and you have a take, I'm interested to see how everybody else feels about it, because obviously I have them making a slight increase, nothing too crazy, not making a deep playoff run. They're just not, in my eyes, equipped that well. Now, the system that Darko puts in place could prove me wrong. But as it stands, I'm going to go ahead and lean towards what we know, which is that they're going to be a consistent mid-level team that you don't love having to play on a nightly basis, but you feel comfortable that if you are already a contending team, you feel comfortable that you're going to leave their arena or leave your own with a W on that evening. But with that being said, go ahead and like the video, subscribe, turn on those post notifications, go ahead and comment your thoughts, and as always, good morning, good evening, good night, no matter where you are on the globe watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.